Welcome to this special broadcast of the Delaware Park Show. I'm Chris Sobocinski, and I'm very excited to be the host. Today, I thought we would go back in time and go over some interviews that Rich Glazier did with some famous people that participated in the sport here at Delaware Park. As you know, I keep going back to it, and I sound like a broken record about all of the number of great horses and great horsemen that have come through Delaware Park and are still here today. We are very blessed. I tell people all the time that the Mid-Atlantic, as far as I'm concerned, is as good, if not better, than any location in the United States for horse racing, and that is because of all of the phenomenal personalities and people that are involved in this sport. Today, we were fortunate to bring you three really good interviews from Rich Glazier, who we are also very fortunate that he did these interviews, and they're classic. We're going to bring you an interview that he did with Carl Hanford, Ramon Dominguez, and Jonathan Shepard, who are all in the Hall of Fame. We're going to start with Carl Hanford. Obviously, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2009. He was the trainer of Kelso, was Horse of the Year from 1960 to 1964. Kelso ran one time here at Delaware Park in the Diamond State Handicap, a race which he won in 1965. He was stabled here every summer that he was Horse of the Year and a couple of other summers. And after his retirement, he retired at Bohemia Stable in Chesapeake, Maryland. So here is the interview that Rich Glazier did with Carl Hanford, the Hall of Fame trainer of Kelso, probably about 20 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, maybe even 30. Here it is.
I've got a special treat for you New York fans today. I've been strolling through the stands here at Delaware Park, and I found a racing legend, Carl Hanford. And if you're not sure who Carl Hanford is, there was once upon a time a horse named Kelso, and as Joe Hirsch said, only once. He was the Horse of the Year 5 times in a row, and just a great horse. And this is the man that trained him, Carl Hanford. And Carl, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you.
What are you doing out here at Delaware Park?
Oh, just coming out here for the races and seeing a few horses. I'd like to see the stake today. I thought the horse that finished second might run pretty good. He did run good, but the winner just outrunning, that's all.
Carl, you know, New York fans, we're doing this for New York City OTB, and New York fans are known to be really rough on their heroes. There's a movie out about Roger Maris, how the fans booed him because they were Mickey Mantle fans. You brought Kelso to New York numerous times. How did the fans treat you in New York with Kelso?
Oh, they were wonderful. I mean, I think Kelso just got to their hearts. I've seen some of the big bettors in New York at different times bet against him and still be rooting for him. Right.
That's very unusual. And, you know, you weren't even like a New Yorker. You were based a lot of times here at Delaware Park and shipped into New York. So don't you find that strange that they took to Kelso?
Well, no, not really, because his 3-year-old year he wasn't in New York very much. But from then on, he was mostly stabled in New York.
Where would you think his most memorable races took place?
I would think New York.
Can you think of some of the ones off the top of your head that stick out in your mind with Kelso?
Well, every one of the Gold Cups stuck out in my mind, but I thought one of his greatest races was the Metropolitan Mile.
I've seen tape of that, Carl, and I still can't believe that he won that race. And when Carl's talking about the Gold Cups, that's the Jockey Club Gold Cup. In those days were 2 miles, and Kelso won them how many times?
5 times.
And how much weight did he used to carry?
Well, I mean, that was the weight for age. That's 126 on all of them. Either 26 or 24. I think 26 on all.
Oh, well, he was in with a feather, those races. How much weight did Kelso win with and carry?
He carried 136 pounds several times and win, and I think he carried over 130. I don't know how many times, but he won probably maybe 8 out of 13.
And he also didn't carry his jockeys with him. You rode numerous jockeys. Could you name some of the jockeys that were on Kelso's back?
Well, to begin with, Hardtack rode him the first time I ever run him, and Hardtack later on as his 3-year-old year, he was trying to get on Tompion, and I switched from Hardtack to Arcaro, and then Arcaro rode him for the next 2 years, and hardly anybody else rode him after that. Walter Brum rode him the first time he ever run in New York, and he run there as a 3-year-old, the fastest mile ever run by a horse in New York. And well, Walter Brum rode him. He's in front all the way that day, and he's a horse that loved to come from behind.
Yeah, but Blum liked to go to the lead. Well, you mentioned Hardtack and Arcaro. Those two names, along with Schumacher, are probably the biggest three names in the history of the game. Did Schumacher ever ride Kelso?
Yeah, he went on him up in New York. But Schumacher, he caught him at a time when he wasn't probably at his tops, because after Schumacher rode him a few times, we switched to Venezuela, and then Venezuela rode him for the next 3 years.
You've just named some great jockeys, Carl, and I know you've been around this racing game a long time. Who do you think, in your opinion, is the greatest jockey you've ever seen?
Well, I'd have to say, I don't know whether you'd be the standout as the greatest would be Eddie Arcaro. I don't think there's any rider rode any better than Don Meade or Jackie Westrope. Jackie Westrope should have been in the Hall of Fame 30 years ago.
We're going to get to the Hall of Fame in a second. While we're on the subject of your memoirs, how about the greatest horse? Do you think Kelso was the greatest horse? And if so, how about some other ones that rank up there with him?
Well, I don't think that will ever be proven who was the greatest, but I think Kelso, they'd have a hard time to find somebody that's any better.
Any other ones that you thought it ranked up there, though?
Well, I never saw Man of War, but he must have been something special.
Did you ever see Citation?
I saw Citation. I don't think Citation could handle a Kelso.
How about Secretary?
I don't think. Well, Secretary, he never raced after his 3-year-old year, so I don't know if they come up with a handicap weight, just what that would be. But I know he'd have his job cut out trying to beat Kelso when they were both at their best.
What you're trying to say is Kelso, he ran like 60 sometimes, won over 30 times, carried the weight, went the distance, went the turf, went the dirt, even sprinted a few times. He did it all, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He did it all, and I think he's one of the fastest horses that ever was. Now they claim about Bo Purple beating him. Bo Purple never beat him with equal weights, maybe one time, but at the time Bo Purple beat him, I got him beat in the Man of War, because I said Bo Purple will never go a mile and a half. You stay back with the axe. My orders beat the horse that day.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, I've interviewed Carl a number of times through the years, and he never blames Kelso for any loss. It's either the jockey goofed up, he threw his shoe at Arlington. Something always is an excuse, and I think that's great that all these years. And speaking of that, Kelso's been retired for 40 years. Do you still think about him?
Oh, certainly.
What are you doing these days, Carl?
Well, we've got one horse here. My daughter's training one 2-year-old, and I go out every morning, and I'm her chief hot walker.
So it keeps you young, doesn't it?
Right.
Do you live around these parts?
I live right in the area. I can walk over here from my house.
And I can justify that. He comes over here quite often, and what an honor it is for Carl Hanford to still be around. And Carl, you brought up the Hall of Fame, and Jackie Westrope just got into it. He didn't get into it. So he didn't get into it, and you're not in the Hall of Fame. What's your thinking about that?
Well, I don't know about me, but I know Jackie Westrope should have been there years ago. I think he's just as good a rider as Arcaro or Schumacher or any of them. I don't think anybody any better than Jackie Westrope was. Another person I think should have been in the Hall of Fame years ago, but he had a tussle with the officials in Mexico. Don Meade, I think it's a shame that he's never been in the Hall of Fame, but he had a black mark against him because he cussed out the officials.
Well, Carl's being humble, of course, as usual, and one person that doesn't have any black marks against him, and no trainer has ever trained a horse to be Horse of the Year 5 times in a row, except this man, Carl Hanford, and I think he should be in the Hall of Fame, too. Carl, thanks for spending a few minutes with us and for the fans in New York.
My pleasure.
Well, there you have it, the interview with the great Hall of Fame trainer, Carl Hanford, who was eventually inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2009. And also to note, Jack Westrope was inducted in the Hall of Fame in 2002. So it did happen. Next up on the docket is we're going to show you an interview that Rich Glazier did with the great Ramon Dominguez. Before anybody put the name Ramon Dominguez in the Hall of Fame together, Rich Glazier was there to interview Ramon. And a good way for me to describe Ramon's career here at Delaware Park is to quote an old from an old article where John Mooney was quoted in the Daily Race Form when we had a Ramon Dominguez retirement day here. John Mooney said, if there has ever been a Hall of Fame career synonymous with Delaware Park, it is his, said John Mooney, Delaware Park's executive director of racing. During the years he dominated Delaware Park, he was also establishing himself on the national level by winning the Breeders' Cup Turf, Wood Memorial, Sword Dancer, just to name a few. Through it all, he did it the right way, and while he was an outstanding rider, he is a greater man. He made the Delaware Park family proud while he rode, and I'm sure he will continue to make us proud in whatever he chooses to do. And he has. He's had a phenomenal riding career and even more phenomenal career afterwards with people and the contributions he's made to this great sport. So without any further ado, because I'm probably messing it up because Rich Glazier and Ramon Dominguez did it perfectly, here's that interview that Rich did with Ramon back in 2000, I believe.
If I were to ask you the question right now as we speak, who is the #1 jockey in North America in the amount of wins, here's your answer, standing right next to me. There he is, Ramon Dominguez. And Ramon, first of all, congratulations being #1.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's find out a little bit about you because the people in New York maybe aren't familiar with you. How old are you?
I'm 24 years old.
24, and where were you born?
I was born in Caracas, Venezuela.
Now, did you ride in Venezuela?
Yes, I did for 1 year.
How's the racing compare there to here?
It's very good racing. I mean, people love horse racing all over the country. And money-wise, it's not as good, definitely. And I think that was the #1 reason why I came to the country.
Now, do they race every day like they do here?
They have 3 main racetracks. One of them races on Wednesdays, and another one races Thursdays and Fridays, and the biggest track races on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays.
Now, since you've come to the United States, have you had a chance to go back home and visit?
Yes, I have several times, and I do as often as I can. Unfortunately, lately I haven't been able to because, I mean, work has picked up.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Are you married, by the way?
I'm engaged, actually. Hopefully I'll be getting married on June 10th.
Somebody here in the States?
Yes, yes.
So you're thinking of get married next month?
Yes, that's correct.
I was going to ask you what you did all your money, but now I know the answer. Hey, Ramon, you're right now #1 in the country in wins, and you seem to be riding 7 days a week. Do you get tired?
I always say that it's more mentally that you get tired because your body gets used to it. It's like when you first start riding, you ride only a couple of horses, and then when business picks up and you start riding 7 and 8 horses, you start getting tired at first, but then you get used to it. Same thing with riding 7 days a week. You get used to it.
Now, but of course you ride in Maryland all their days, and then here in Delaware on Monday and Tuesdays. Some days do you want to just tell your agent, can I just take the day off?
You know why? It's funny because actually he's the one who tells me when I should take a day off. You know, he said, you know what, business is like this day, you should get a day off.
Now, how about how many mounts a day? If you had your pick, would you ride 3 times, 10 times? What would you go for?
I enjoy riding as many times as I can, especially with this agent that I have. I mean, he does such a good job, and I always ride very light mounts, and that makes it so much enjoyable.
It's kind of interesting. Here you are, the leading jockey in the country. You came up on Monday to Delaware Park. You only had 1 mount all day, and of course you won with it. I mean, is that worthwhile to do?
Definitely. We knew coming in that the horse had a very good chance, and even if things didn't work out as well as it did, I still would have been happy to come up here and ride the horse.
Okay, now on Tuesday today you have 4 mounts at Delaware Park, but I took a look at them, and you've never ridden any of them. Now, as a jockey, is it easier to ride a horse that you've ridden before, or sometimes is it better to get on them fresh?
To be honest, sometimes horses, some horses, you need to get to know them, and you feel like after you ride them the first time, you learn so much about them. But most likely, in my opinion, I always let the horses tell me what they want to do, and so it doesn't really make any difference whether I rode them before or no. I will try to get a feeling and let them do what they're comfortable with.
Okay, Ramon, now you are currently #1 in the country. Do you have a goal? Are you trying to end up the year #1? Are you going to go for it?
Definitely. I'm going for it, and I'm very happy with the way things are going, obviously, and talking about goals, I really don't set too many goals. I just take it as it goes day by day, and I'm very thankful to be doing as well as I'm doing, and hopefully things will get even better. And I like to be riding the big races. I guess that's probably my main goal. Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be long coming because you've certainly turned a lot of heads. And Ramon, finally, I just want to ask you this. You ride 7 days a week. You're the leading jockey in the country. You're going to get married next week. You're making all kinds of money. Do you have time to spend it?
Yes, I do, definitely. That's not a problem.
All right, well, you know, you asked me, when I asked you to do the interview, you said you wanted $50, so how about giving me $50 for the interview?
I think it's worth more than that. Thank you so much.
All right, Ramon Dominguez, take a good look at him, New York fans, because he is really knows what he's doing out there on the racetrack, and we certainly hope he continues to be numero uno. Thank you, Ramon.
Thank you.
Rich Glazier called it that time with Ramon Dominguez. Ramon Dominguez was inducted into the Racing Hall of Fame in 2016. He was inducted in the Delaware Park Wall of Fame of 2017. He was the two-time Delaware Handicap winning jockey, and he was leading rider here at Delaware Park 5 times from 2003 to 2006 and 2008. Okay, next up on the Hall of Fame interviews is Jonathan Shepard, who was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1990. And Jonathan Shepard in 2012 notched his 3,000th career victory here at Delaware Park. And as Rich Glazier often does, he has a way of bringing out the best in some of the best people, and he certainly did that in this interview that he did with Jonathan Shepard about 25 years ago. Here we go.
Well, for you New Yorkers, it's not unusual to be walking around the track and bump into Hall of Fame trainers, but here at Delaware Park, we don't have all that many, but I have one with us today, Hall of Fame trainer Jonathan Shepard. Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you, Richie.
Jonathan, you have so many horses. How many exactly do you have?
Oh, I'm not going to tell you that. I don't think I even know, but I know it's well up over 100. We've got a kind of a mixed group, you know, young horses, older horses, turf horses, dirt horses, 2-year-olds, older horses, layups, and steeplechase horses. So we don't have a huge number in any one category, but when you put them all together, we do have a good few.
Well, I know you have some stable here and some at the farm. What determines who's at the farm and who's at the track?
Well, we kind of rotate them a little bit. I like to bring the young ones in here, of course, early, get them used to the track and get the gate cards tattooed and so on. And then we kind of maybe bring in a little group, get that done, send them back, bring in another. And some of the older horses, I think they enjoy having a little spell on the farm between races, particularly the fillies. They seem to do well out there.
And how about you? You mentioned jump racing, and we're doing this for New York, and Saratoga's about a month away. I know you gear up for that. How do you get the horses ready for that? What percentage of your horses are jumpers?
Probably about only 1 in 4. Some of them go both ways, I think, as you know. But we are starting to, think ahead a little bit to Saratoga and lay some out, and hopefully we'll make a good showing up there.
What determines if you have a horse to stay on the flat or go over the jumps? Do you make that decision, or do you test them all over the jump?
Well, I'd say for the most part at this point, I pretty much treat everything as flat horses when they first come in the stable. And we go as far as we can with them, condition-wise. And then if necessary, during the time we do school them a little bit so that if we do make a transition, it comes fairly quickly.
Now, how about, like, say, on Saturday at Delaware Park, you had a horse that had been jumping about 5 straight times. You put him on the flat, and he won. Now, are you going to keep him on the flat, or was that just a prep for the spa?
Actually, a little bit of both. He's a horse that we had pretty high hopes for. He won his first 2 starts over jumps as a 3-year-old, never having run on the flat before, and both in sort of little minor stakes. And we thought we really might have a super horse, and it turned out that maybe he'd won those races so easily he wasn't learning that much. Then he disappointed a couple of times, and I thought, well, I know he's better than this. We'll give him a little bit of seasoning on the flat, maybe pick up a purse too if we get lucky, and sure enough we did.
That's why he's a Hall of Fame trainer. And here's another thing, Jonathan, as you probably hear me in the paddock a lot, I talk about the breeding. I'm big on breeding for turf. But you beat me so many times with horses that aren't bred for the turf. Do you put everything on the turf, whether the breeding is for it or not?
I mean, there are obviously certain lines that seem to predominate on turf, but I really think a good horse is a good horse on any ground, and if they're accustomed to it. And because I have my farm facility and also South Carolina in the winter we train a lot on the grass, that probably gives me just a little bit of an edge, because our horses are a little bit more used to it than some others.
All right, Jonathan, when you were a little boy growing up in Great Britain, did you ever dream that you would be a Hall of Famer in the United States of America?
When I was a little boy growing up in England, it's so long ago, I'm not sure if I can remember.
No, that's another question. Do you ever get homesick and, and think about maybe moving back home and training over there?
earlier on I did on occasion think that, well, I've always sort of got that to fall back on if things aren't going well, but at this point I've got family over here, I'm entrenched, I've got a little breeding program of my own horses, and actually going back to your previous question, before I wanted to be a trainer, I wanted to be a jockey. Lester Piggott was my idol.
Was you got a little too big for that?
I think I'm probably a little bit lacking in ability too.
Am I not mistaken? Did I once see you ride in a race at Fair Hill once?
Oh yeah, I did ride quite a little bit at one time, and but not for several years now.
Actually, I think I saw Mr. Strawbridge, owner of Augusta Stables, riding Odd Man for you, a round table horse at Fair Hill. Do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely right. He did ride quite a little bit as an amateur and had a certain amount of success.
All right, Jonathan, there's another trainer around here who's also from England. His name's Michael Dickinson. A lot of times you two are pointing for the same races. You're both fellow countrymen. Are you friendly, or is there a rivalry?
No, as a matter of fact, Michael and I are pretty good friends, and I certainly have a healthy respect for him, and I hope it's reciprocated. He's sort of a master in his own way. We both have our own farms. Of course, he's exclusively farm at this point. He's had a wonderful record as a steeplechase trainer and has made the transition. And, a little quirky, we know that, but, I never count out a horse of his when I see him in the entries, that's for sure.
Well, I'm glad to hear you guys get along, because you're both my idols, too, because you do so well on the turf. And, Jonathan, you also hear me talking about you with your streaks. Like down at Gulfstream this winter, you maybe won one race out of a bunch, and all of a sudden here at Delaware, you can't seem to do anything wrong. What do you think causes this streakiness?
It's partly you can just say, well, that's racing. We had a good meet at Keeneland, too. Then we kind of leveled off a little bit, and then we had a good little run here. I think, to be honest, a little bit of our our Florida winter is sort of with a view to preparing the horses for later on, although obviously we do try to win there, but some of the horses are being kind of tested out a little bit and coming from layoffs and tuning them up for something later. After that, to me, it's just horse racing. I don't know why it goes like that, but it sure seems to, and you never know what's around the corner, whether it's going to be good or bad.
And Monday, you have a horse in the fourth race here, Gethsemane. Any thoughts on him or her?
Him. At least you pronounced his name right. When he won here the other day, they called him Gethsemane. But he's useful. He's a nice old horse. He's one of my homebreds, actually. My wife and I own him together. And I did take a quick look at the race. I think there's he's definitely a step up, having won his last start. But hopefully he'll be competitive.
And you have two on Tuesday. Maybe you can look ahead there. Tonwi Spring and Let's Canoodle.
Let's Canoodle, but sort of testing the States company. She's eligible for two. Other than it's kind of a big step up, but I think she is a fairly talented filly, and this might be a good time to see what we've got. I frankly would be surprised if she's quite good enough to win it, but hopefully she won't be disgraced. Tanwy Spring is an inexperienced 3-year-old. She ran once one of these races I'm talking about in Florida, where we sort of tuned her up a little bit, and the distance we thought was too short for her. She may need a run around 2 turns, but I haven't really looked at the competition in that race. Still, we don't know a whole lot about her yet, but I think at some point she should be competitive at that level anyway.
Okay, we'll be looking for you on Monday and Tuesday here at Delaware Park. And Jonathan, my final question, since you grew up in England, did you ever know any of the Beatles?
No, I think we moved in a little bit different circles, but thanks for asking.
Okay, Jonathan Shepard, thank you for your time, and now let's go back to the studio.
And that's the interview with Hall of Fame trainer Jonathan Shepard, who has won the Colonial Cup steeplechase 14 times in his career. 4 times he won the Breeders' Cup Grand National Steeplechase. Trained horses such as Cafe Prince, Flatterer, Highland Bud, Stormcat, Forever Together, Cloudy's Night, and Informed Decision. Jonathan Shepard being interviewed by Hall of Fame interviewer Rich Glazier. Okay, Carl Hanford was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2006. He was inducted into the Delaware Sports Hall of Fame in 1999 and the Delaware Park Wall of Fame in 2009. Ramon Dominguez was inducted into the Racing Hall of Fame in 2016, Wall of Fame in 2017. And Jonathan Shepard was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1990, and he recently retired in early January. So that does it for the show. I'll be back again next week.